Hey folks, this is Harold Goldberg, the president of the New York Video Game Critics Circle, and we're here today to present our 13th annual New York Game Awards nominations. We're really excited about it, and it's for our show at SVA Theater on January 23rd. So the Critics Circle is a nonprofit, and the proceeds from the awards go towards our journalism classes, internships, and scholarships for underserved and unhoused students. And this year we're honoring Neil Druckmann at our awards, and he's the creator of The Last of Us games and the HBO TV show. And we'll also have as co-host former Nintendo of America president and CEO Reggie Fils-Aime. So that should be good. And you can find out more at nygamecritics.com, and you can get tickets over there too. So we are absolutely honored to have our nominations presentation and Game of the Year panel right here at the Paley Center for Media in Midtown Manhattan. This is awesome. And when you visit here, you can check out Paley GX, which is all about games and all about high-tech consoles, and they have the best new games as well. So I've been here and checked it out myself. It's really an awesome experience. Now, here's last year's Best Acting winner, Manon Gage from Immortality, and our senior writer, Makeda Byfield, with the nominations for the 13th Annual New York Game Awards.
Thank you, Harold. On behalf of the New York Video Game Critics Circle, we are excited to reveal the nominees for this year's New York Game Awards. I'm Manon Gage.
And I'm Makeda Byfield. This will be a very special year for the New York Game Awards, so make sure you're following us at NYVGCC on social for more announcements leading up to the event.
Without further ado, here are the nominees for the 13th Annual New York Game Awards.
Jotun Joe Award for Best Esports Player of the Year. Matthew Zaiwu Herbal, Alexis Zen Bernier, Paco Hydria Rusiewicz, Arshan Ash Siddiqui, Lee Faker Sang-Hyu, and Choi Zeus Wooji.
A-Train Award for Best Mobile Game. Monster Hunter Now, Kimono Cats, Honkai Star Rail, Terra Nil, Hello Kitty Island Adventure, Laya's Horizon.
Central Park Zoo Award for Best Kids Game. Chia, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Disney Illusion Island, Pikmin 4, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2, Super Mario Bros. Wonder.
Freedom Tower Award for Best Remake. Super Mario RPG, Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, Star Ocean, The Second Story, Resident Evil 4, Metroid Prime Remastered, Dead Space.
Statue of Liberty Award for Best World. Starfield, Chants of Sennaar, Final Fantasy XVI, Baldur's Gate 3, Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake 2.
Off-Broadway Award for Best Indie Game. Sea of Stars, Chants of Sennaar, A Space for the Unbound, Jasant, Pizza Tower, Viewfinder, El Paso Elsewhere, The Talos Principle 2.
Herman Melville Award for Best Writing in a Game. Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, Alan Wake 2, Thirsty Suitors, Starfield, Chia, Baldur's Gate 3.
Coney Island Dreamland Award for Best AR/VR Game. We Are One, Assassin's Creed Nexus VR, Body of Mine, Horizon Call of the Mountain, Asgard's Wrath 2, Humanity.
Great White Way Award for Best Acting in a Game. Ben Starr as Clive Rossfield in Final Fantasy XVI. Elizabeth Sada as Riley in Oxenfree 2, Lost Signals. Melanie Liburd as Saga Anderson in Alan Wake 2. Idris Elba as Solomon Reed in Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty. Neil Newbon as Asterion in Baldur's Gate 3. Amelia Tyler as the narrator in Baldur's Gate 3.
Tin Pan Alley Award for Best Music in a Game. The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Hi-Fi Rush, Baldur's Gate 3, Final Fantasy XVI, Chia, Alan Wake 2.
Chumley Speakeasy Award for Best Hidden Gem. Outer Terror. Conrad Stevenson's Paranormal PI. American Arcadia. 9 Years of Shadows. Videoverse. Slay the Princess.
NYC GWB Award for Best DLC. Horizon Forbidden West, Burning Shores. Resident Evil 4, Separate Ways. Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty. Dead Cells, Return to Castlevania. God of War Ragnarok, Valhalla. Vampire Survivors, Co-op Mode.
The Knickerbocker Award for Best Games Journalism. Andrea Long Chu, Vulture. Nicole Carpenter, Polygon. Brendan Sinclair, GamesIndustry.biz. Blessing Adeoye Jr., Kinda Funny. Ed Smith, PCGamesN.com. Hanif Abdurrajib, The Paris Review. Reed McCarter, Bullets Points Monthly.
Big Apple Award for Game of the Year. Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. Alan Wake 2. Baldur's Gate 3. Starfield. Hi-Fi Rush. Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty.
Those are your nominees for the New York Game Awards.
2023 was an exciting year for games. Congrats to all of the nominees.
We hope you can join us live and in person on Tuesday, January 23rd at the SVA Theater in Manhattan for the New York Game Awards.
The awards will also be streamed on the New York Video Game Critics Circle YouTube and Twitch channels. Thank you all for tuning in for this year's nominees.
Now, enjoy a live stream panel from the Paley Center for Media with the New York Video Game Critics Circle as they discuss the best games of 2023. Take it away, Harold.
Thank you so much, Manon and Makeda. Manon was right. It's been an exciting year for games, and also it's been a surprisingly exciting year for games. So we have an esteemed panel here. Kimari Rennes has been a long-time writing intern for us and is making games now at NYU Game Center. Ronald Gordon is our Roundup columnist and associate mentor. Carolyn Pettit is here from Kotaku, and Jordan Miner is here. He's the author of Video Game of the Year, which is doing really quite well, I hear. So let's get to talking about some of the games of the year that we've seen. Kimari, you reviewed a big one and a long one, Baldur's Gate 3 for us. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like?
The first thing I want to say is that I am so glad I was able to get that review code from you, because that was a fantastic game to play. It's been a long time since I've really been enamored with a game and like addicted to one. And yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 has definitely done that. I feel like it's been breaking boundaries, really. There's just so much content in the game, so many branching narrative pathways, so many interactions and like gameplay opportunities and combat. And even when you finish the story, there's just still so much replayability. I think I'm on my 3rd playthrough now. It's just such a fantastic game.
How much time did you spend on Baldur's Gate 3?
Oh, wow. I think I'm around 100 hours right now, but during the time of my review, I think while I was getting used to the game, I had a 5-hour-long play session, and then when I added more to my review, I think I played for 11 hours straight. That's how much it just had me just trapped in the game.
I think you said you were angry at it early on.
Yes. I will say Baldur's Gate 3 was not a game I was used to at first. I wasn't used to, turn-based strategy and stuff like that, let alone narrative games, because I'm more of an action person. But once I got used to the controls and like the sort of, Dungeons and Dragons inspiration and like, learning the mechanics, that's when I really, I went on autopilot. I didn't even realize that I liked the game until I finished my review.
I feel the same way that you did, that it was, I played Baldur's Gate 2 when I was working for Sony Online Entertainment as editor-in-chief. And that was decades ago, and it was a steep learning curve as well. And I'd forgotten all about it, so this was a steep learning curve for me. So I'm glad you got through it and loved it.
Yes, it's definitely worth it to get past that learning curve, because the story and gameplay is so rich once you finally understand it. So I love the game.
Ronald, you played a lot of Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. Can you talk about that experience? You also said it was a little like Elden Ring, our game of the year.
Yeah, it
last year.
Very challenging, because it's very much outside of the normal format for FromSoft games, because it's very mission-based. It's not like there's a story, but you go through it by playing through missions. And I was so obsessed with it that I went through all 3 of the endings, because there was so much character, so much world building, and so many emotions that you could feel just by being in a mech. And I loved every moment of it, and I loved all the different builds I came up with. I gave them each different names, actually based off of mountains.
Based off of mountains. How long did it take you to finish it?
More than a couple of hours. I believe my save probably says like 30 to beyond a normal healthy amount of playtime.
And you also, I think, said that you like the story. So can you tell us a little bit about the story?
The basic grounding of the story is you're another dog in a war that's not yours to win, and you're mainly here for money, and a secret motive that no one will really tell you, that you have to figure out. But for the most part, it doesn't give you much characterization other than you're another dog in the fight, and I really like that.
That's cool. So, Carolyn, you wrote a very long story for Kotaku about Alan Wake 2. Right. So can you talk to us about that experience? Did you play the first one? How different is this one?
Yeah.
It's an awesome game, too.
Yeah. So Alan Wake 2, which was released this past year, it comes out 13 years after the original Alan Wake. And in that time, I think that it's fair to say that Remedy, the studio behind it, and its creative director Sam Lake, maybe hit some obstacles at times in trying to get Alan Wake 2 made. Hence the 13-year period between the original game and the new game. And obviously, I think that I imagine that to be a very frustrating experience creatively, but at the same time, I think that Alan Wake 2, the game that we have today, probably really benefited from that, because it's almost like in the game you feel 13 years of pent-up creative energy like being unleashed. So the first game, I would say, I think the first game is original and interesting. It's very distinctive, but it also feels, I would say, a bit restrained. Like it's sort of about horror in a sense, but it's not really a horror game, and it doesn't really go for the jugular. Whereas Alan Wake 2 it's one of the most like creatively audacious, I would say, games in the mainstream big budget space that we've seen in a long time, where it does really want to scare you, to unnerve you. It does a lot of really innovative things with live action and with real actors to kind of build up its atmosphere and give you this feeling almost of like slipping between different layers of reality. But it's also like very committed to its vision. Like, so for instance, it's called Alan Wake 2, and yet it takes hours for Alan Wake, the title character, to even really show up. You spend the first few hours playing this character named Saga Anderson, who's an FBI profiler, and the game starts out having this kind of rainy, gloomy, Pacific Northwest murder mystery vibe.
Well, let me interrupt there for just a minute.
Yeah.
So that the beginning of that game bodes for lots of creativity to come, in my estimation. And one of the things I think they do that I haven't seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that often in video games, since I began playing them so many years ago, when you're kind of trapped in an area, you see a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, and you can go toward that,
right,
and you can get out. But at the beginning of this, there is no pathway.
Yeah, it does feel very much like.
So you feel trapped.
Yes, you do. And the game, I appreciate that the game is willing to kind of maybe shun what we might call the conventional wisdom of game design, or these ideas of like, players need to have like a clear sense of progression or a clear goal, and really kind of let you just sit with its desire to unnerve you. And I don't want to get into spoilers about what happens later in the game, but I just want to say that it's one of those games where it really does reward like close reading and analysis. Like, this is a game that's going to, I'm sure, probably has already spawned lots of YouTube like analysis videos, like the ending of Alan Wake 2 explained.
Yeah.
And it actually has a substance to back up that kind of analysis. It's not a game that's just like weird for weird's sake. Like, there really are layers of meaning and lots of ideas rooted in what Alan Wake 2 is doing.
And there's a wittiness about it too. So
and a playfulness.
A playfulness. So it's influenced. I see a little bit of David Lynch,
for sure,
and a little bit of X-Files.
Yes.
And there are signs. For instance, you get to play for a while in New York City. I don't think that's a big spoiler.
Yeah, I don't think
so.
And
in the subway there are little like humorous elements.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a horror game, but it's not a horror game that leaves you feeling like. It's not a doom and gloom horror game. It is a playful, invigorating horror game that has, one of the most exciting, maybe musical sequences in maybe any game ever. So, it's doing a lot of really creative and interesting stuff.
And Jordan, I know from knowing you for many years now that you're a Nintendo fan.
Yes.
And you played the new Legend of Zelda. Can you talk a little bit about what you liked about that game and how it fits into, or doesn't fit in, to the series?
Sure. So no matter what we end up picking as a group, Tears of the Kingdom is my personal game of the year for this year. So I'm just getting that on the record. But yeah, I mean, Breath of the Wild, I think, is one of the best games ever made. It really raised standards across the board for not just Zelda, but for that kind of game. And was it 6 years later, the expectations for the sequel, I think, were astronomical. And I'm really enamored with the ways they decided to build on what Breath of the Wild was doing. They saw these videos of people making bootleg vehicles and flying machines and contraptions in that first game, and decided, we should just put this in the game. This should just be the game. These building mechanics of making these vehicles and mechs and stuff. And before Nintendo was making video games, they were making just toys. They made a toy called the Ultra Hand that was this kind of grabbing thing.
That's right.
And they decided to call the ability in Tears of the Kingdom Ultra Hand for making these devices. And so beyond just kind of being like a funny Easter egg thing, I think that speaks to Nintendo's philosophy as like toy makers and making things that are meant to be played with. So Tears of the Kingdom, on one hand, totally stands toe-to-toe with like Elden Ring and Horizon. It's just as a it's a AAA sort of open world action game, but it's also very meant to be played with, and I really admire that about it.
Yeah, and that Ultra Hand thing is kind of a meta thing too. So they're always concerned or thoughtful of their history as game makers. So how did you feel about that construction ability that you have? Was it where did it feel to you like it worked best? And was there any wow moments for you, and where didn't it perhaps not work so well?
I think it works best just as a way of just expressing just your creativity, of just, I see something vaguely that I want to do, can I just chop down enough trees to make the bridge that will maybe get me there, or get, even on like that tutorial island, can I angle it at just the right way so that if I jump, it feels like I'm breaking the game, but they totally want me to do it like that. So that's where I thought it ended up feeling the best. I also appreciate too that if you want, you can make these really like out of like mechs, like giant monsters almost people are doing with like, if you get all the batteries and stuff like that. But you don't really need to go that hard into it to play the game, to get a lot out of it.
I love that. Like I was intimidated at first because I thought I'm not an arts and crafts person. I'm not an engineer. So if this game is going to demand that of me, I'm out of luck. But I found that it was actually very inviting, and even my just fumbling, like, well, okay, I'm not going to build a mech. I'll just glue these logs together and sort of try to fumble my way out. And even that was like rewarded and encouraged. So I think it's great how players, no matter your interest level or skill level with that kind of like clever building, like I think you'll be rewarded by that mechanic in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, and I too, for like the first hour or so, I think the first bridge I built fell down a mountain. It's like, oh man, but it does reward you and has awesome moments throughout. Even the smaller moments are pretty cool. Also, Jordan, you played Spider-Man 2, as a lot of us did. What were your feelings about the new Spider-Man?
Yeah, I think...
Which also, by the way, is one of the longest running series in video game history. I think there's 40+ Spider-Man games. Right.
Yeah, he's in Tony Hawk at some point, I think, too. Yeah, I think out of all these kind of modern prestige kind of Sony blockbuster games, Spider-Man is probably my favorite, because I like Spider-Man. But they do it in that game. They do a good job, I think, of making it make sense to have the two different Spider-Man. That's kind of a big, you have Peter Parker and Miles Morales in this game.
Yeah.
And beyond just their abilities feeling different, I like that in their storytelling. There's a cool split of, when you're Peter Parker, you're doing kind of the more comic booky things, I feel, of fighting these kind of known supervillains and dealing with the symbiote and all that stuff. But I felt I was gravitating more towards the Miles Morales sections, where I feel like you were doing more you're just the kind of local New York guy, kind of helping people, which is kind of what I like more out of Spider-Man anyway, is that kind of more grounded street level stuff.
Well, the depth of, like, for want of a better word, coolness of being in New York and doing so many things within the virtual city, which is fairly realistic, is pretty cool. You as Peter, I think, take a lot of photos of kind of normal things we see here in Manhattan, Bronx, and like people in carts, selling stuff. It's pretty cool that far, but it really grabs you from the beginning, where it's supposed to be a tutorial level, but it's just kind of gobsmacking in the sense that the action is so cool with Sandman in the first half hour or so.
Yeah, you're like flying across the whole city, and they're kind of showing off the PS5's like SSD fast loading stuff.
It reminds me a bit of the original God of War 2 on like PlayStation 2, I think, right? It starts with the stunning battle against the Colossus of Rhodes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's this generation's version of that. This like intro that just like grabs you and has the spectacle and like demonstrates kind of the the power of the console, but is also just like thrilling to play.
Well, Sony was, you're right, Carolyn, Sony was so innovative in introducing us to those giant monsters that take up the screen, and certainly with God of War. Has anyone else played Spider-Man? Not yet.
My friend's a big fan, though.
Yeah. So how about Starfield? How about, has anyone delved into it? I reviewed it. I think not to toot my own horn, but had the worldwide exclusive for the Washington Post when it first premiered.
Pretty cool.
So I thought it was pretty cool when it came out. And I was particularly drawn to non-playable characters, particularly this one. You see this one young man at the beginning, and he kind of tells you a story that's almost felt like a Christmas story to me, or something like that. That just his naivete and his honesty. It's just like, oh, that's pretty cool. But what did you guys think of Starfield?
I didn't put as much time into it as I would have liked. I'm actually, probably taking a little vacation soon, and maybe that'll be my chance to like delve deeper into Starfield, because I think it's one of those games where it just, it feels so vast that I think that was the thing for me is like early on I get a sense of just how huge the map is, the galaxy is, and of course the idea of having your own ship and being able to sort of set a course and just is thrilling. But it's also like, I'm going to need some time to to dig into this.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I feel like, for me, Baldur's Gate really took up all of my time.
Sure.
And when you have so many large games to play.
Yes.
Speaking of all the nominees, I bought them all for Christmas, and I'm going to take my time playing them.
Great.
But it's that, thing of bandwidth.
Exactly.
I'm already dedicating hundreds of hours to Baldur's Gate. I cannot do Starfield at the same time.
I will say, like, to go back to Alan Wake 2 briefly, like, in this world of games that are, and I think Spider-Man 2 is fairly concise too for that kind of open world game. Like Alan Wake 2, is like maybe a cool, I don't know, like 15 hours is not like a short amount of time, but among games that are maybe, eager to eat up as much of your time as possible, it's kind of nice to just play a game that's, has a beginning, middle, and end, and 15 hours, you're kind of like, okay, I had a great experience with that, and now I can move on, right? There's something to be said, I think, for both approaches. Like, of course, I love those games that you can just get lost in for. I certainly spent well upwards of 100 hours with Tears of the Kingdom, so I'm not like criticizing that approach at all, but yeah.
Ronald, you played a fairly shorter game that you were enamored of, which is called Hi-Fi Rush. Can you talk about Hi-Fi Rush?
Yeah, Hi-Fi Rush. The most unconventional rhythm game I have ever played, and I'm like terrible at rhythm games, but I loved it because it had so much soul, so much spirit, and it had a main character, Chai, who feels like such like a comic book character in a world of gritty action heroes. I loved the energy of it, and just the whole feel of the game really kept me. I found myself sitting late at night, just hours, just playing through the game, getting down the rhythms, because it's a very fun game when you know how to match the pace of it, and it gives you a lot of opportunities to match its pace of, it's a rhythm game, play to the songs, play to the rhythms, and not only Hi-Fi Rush is the reason why I have at least 3 different Nine Inch Nails songs on most of my playlists now. But also the music they made for the game itself is brilliant, and I was waiting for the longest time for them to release the soundtrack, and it's also on my playlist.
And Ronald is one of our mentors when we go to schools to teach our after-school games journalism classes. And Ronald, you've used Hi-Fi Rush to teach kids as well. So what have our younger students said about Hi-Fi Rush?
They enjoyed it. It was a little bit of a challenge to find out how to pass up the controller because you want everybody to play. But the simplest thing was if you miss a beat, you pass the controller, and we switched controllers very fast. But it was very fun. It was lighthearted, and a lot of people got into it to the point where the tutorial itself was a fast thing to get through, and it felt like a real fun time.
Yeah, well, thanks for mentoring our kids, man. I appreciate it.
I just want to say too, they're so smart in that game to recognize that like character action games like Bayonetta and Devil May Cry are already like pretty like inherently rhythmic, just in the combos and the timing and having to like read enemies like you're doing a dance. So they were just smart to recognize that and make that explicit. Like this is a rhythm game.
Yeah, and it dropped out of nowhere. Really, it's like suddenly here it is.
It was
there was
I think it was a surprise.
Yeah,
very underrated.
No big marketing push for it. Here it is. Play it. The last one we'll talk about is Cyberpunk 2077: Phantom Liberty, which stars Idris Elba and a bunch of other great actors. The backstory is that Cyberpunk had a fraught beginning, but now they've come back with this downloadable content, which essentially is a game in itself. So, Jordan, you want to talk about it?
Sure. So I didn't necessarily even hate the original version of that game. I was fortunate enough that I didn't really have a ton of bugs, but I was disappointed by it. I found it like kind of. It was more like coming off The Witcher 3, which was such a great, real, dense, open world RPG. Cyberpunk kind of felt more like a Far Cry kind of game almost. I thought they weren't making the best use of this really kind of visually striking world that they created. So I hadn't played kind of the smaller updates they've been kind of doing throughout. So all the new stuff that they had changed about it kind of all hit me at once while I was playing Phantom Liberty. But it was really, again, just the storytelling again in this one that really kind of elevated it for me. They shifted this kind of more spy mode, and in the story and also kind of the activities that you're doing. And I thought that was just really well done.
Yeah, it was a clean game as far as I'm concerned. So we've talked about our games of the year. We could talk about every nominee, but we'd be here till 6 o'clock doing that. But let's talk a little bit about what we're looking forward to for 2024. In a couple of weeks, this really small game, Onion Boy Robs a Bank, comes out, which there's like the third of the Onion Boy series. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I think there's next month there's an Annapurna game that's road trip oriented. So I'm a sucker for a road trip game. But whoever wants to go first can.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by soon we'll have the second entry in the Final Fantasy VII remake project, right? Which is, taking the original PS1 RPG Final Fantasy VII and remaking it as 3 games, but that definitely, divert from the narrative of the original in some way. So it's kind of like this meta. This meta narrative where it's like, oh, you expect the story to go this way, but no, we're going to go this way. And I think with this chapter, the second chapter, they're going to have to commit in a big way to some, I think narrative differences from the original game. And I'm just really excited to see what choices they've made in revisiting that narrative and trying to kind of play with our expectations around the original by, adhering to them in some ways, but also really breaking off and going in a totally different direction in others.
Yeah, and Final Fantasy VII is arguably the most beloved of that franchise. So fans will be watching to see how well they do.
Absolutely.
We talk about me being a Nintendo fan. So I think one of the most anticipated things that's not even confirmed at all, but this idea that we may get some news on a new Switch this year, or just a new Nintendo console.
Switch console, yeah.
I think the Switch is an all-timer for game consoles at this point. So they just need to make another one of those that is more powerful, and it needs to be backwards compatible with the Switch library. That's the number one thing. Absolutely. They built an incredible library. Yes. It cannot burn people again.
Yeah, it's key to have backwards compatibility, and people. Perhaps to make more money, all of our big video game makers seem to not want to do backwards compatibility as much. but hopefully Nintendo will do that. Anybody else looking for stuff?
Oh, I was too excited watching the teaser trailer to pay attention to the release date, but Monster Hunter Wilds.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Kamara, you're our Monster Hunter expert.
Oh, I am a Monster Hunter mega fan.
Yes.
I think I have about 600 hours on Monster Hunter World. I've played Sunbreak. I've played Rise. I've played Generations Ultimate. I've played 3 Ultimate on the Wii U. I picked it up off of eBay because I was just like, I need to play this. Oh my God, I have 4 Ultimate on the 3DS. I even got the little attachment so I could move the camera better.
An underrated console. Right.
Oh, I really hope that Monster Hunter Wilds really takes more from Monster Hunter World rather than Rise and Sunbreak, because Sunbreak really felt more arcadey and introduced like a lot of, it really took away from the simplicity of World. World was more like, it's easy for everyone to pick up, but it can quickly become, easy to learn, hard to master, and that's what I really liked about it. When the Sunbreak DLC came out, it added a lot of complexity, which really, messed up my vibe. Even though I really liked it, it took more from the older games, which I'm really starting to enjoy. But the idea of a sort of open world Monster Hunter game is really exciting, and I look forward to seeing more about it.
Many more hours of
Yes.
Sorry to disappoint you. I do think that is 2025. It is.
Dang. Well, we'll look forward to it anyway.
Yeah. Well, just know 2025, that'll be
Kamari, you'll be there.
That'll be my game. I'm thinking about it now. That's how much I want it.
That's right. Well, we won't have Grand Theft Auto 6 until 25 as well.
Yeah.
So 25 will be a year to look forward to. Ronald, do you have anything that you're looking at?
Mainly just the various projects coming from Marvel Studios. Like, I'm really hopeful for the Blade game because Blade is underappreciated as a Marvel character, and I want them to do him a justice in a game.
And I think Arcane, who is making the Blade game, which has this history of the kind of immersive sims and like games that do allow for all kinds of different approaches, I feel like that studio and that character are such a great match. So really, I share your excitement around that one.
We want to thank our esteemed panel, Jordan, Carolyn, Ronald, and Kamari, for taking the time to come here to the Paley Center for Media today. And we want to thank Manon, Gage, and Makeda Byfield for presenting our awesome games. We'll have another Games of the Year panel just before our awards at SVA Theater on the 23rd of January. And again, we'll be honoring Neil Druckmann, the creator of Last of Us, and you can get tickets or link to tickets on our site, nygamecritics.com, and NYVGCC on our socials. So thank you so much to the good people at the Paley Center for Media. And we love this place. It's so convenient in New York. And thanks for hosting us. And see you at the New York Game Awards, folks. Thank you.